The information revolution is changing the way our cities move. On the next digital journey, host John Gage explores 21st century transportation systems.
Los Angeles has over 1,000 square kilometers of freeways, on-ramps, and automobile congestion. Curitiba, Brazil's smaller, smart city, has a transportation system based on energy-efficient busways, linking transit and economic development. Can Los Angeles learn from Curitiba's success? I'm John Gage. Join me on this digital journey.
LA traffic, an overloaded network of freeways and roads built without the capacity to adapt.
I think traffic sucks, especially through here.
A city bus system ridden only by the working poor, too old and too slow to ease the congestion.
Articles in the paper that you read where it's taking people 2 and 3 hours even to get to work, which is just crazy.
LA's response? Build a subway system.
We have wasted billions of dollars on subways.
For $7 billion, the city has built 22 miles of subway track in 16 stations. They've built a gleaming new $400 million headquarters despite abundant vacancies in downtown office buildings. Now, the subway is running out of money.
Southern California works as a region and people function as a region. We do need to look at the full region and think about this whole problem in an affordable way.
That's what the city of Curitiba, Brazil, a city some call the world's first smart city, did.
Curitiba, to me, is a role model, the beacon for transportation of the 21st century.
Curitiba has linked economic development and growth with an adaptable network of bus routes. The question for Los Angeles is how to combine the lessons of Curitiba with the most appropriate systems technology. Los Angeles is experimenting with alternative traffic designs. One innovation is the Smart Shuttle, a localized, demand-responsive network of small vans that operate in concentrated geographic areas. It all began with a neighborhood survey.
We went out with our whole staff and we talked to people on the streets. We have found in our area that there's a shortage of transportation running north and south. Because we talk with the people, they are very interested in getting on board.
They're right there with the community, so I think it's a wonderful way to approach the delivery of transit service.
The network had to respond to the needs of the riders, so passengers can call a dispatch center and schedule rides to neighborhood shopping areas or other transportation hubs.
We have flexible service where they run on a primary route and they can flex off the route if the individual needs it. The individual can also call on demand, or they can book trips in advance.
Smart shuttles carry global positioning system electronics, allowing dispatchers to track their movement on PCs. Dispatchers can then send the closest van to answer a call. Fare taking is fast and easy, using electronic smart cards instead of money.
It's a card that looks like a credit card or a debit card. The idea of the card is that it's contactless. There is a chip inside that contains the information necessary to process the fare.
The smart cards are programmed in different languages, making information readout easier in neighborhoods where English is a second language. Passengers reuse the same card over and over. If the smart shuttles succeed, while the subway struggles, planners like Martha Wellborn can point to Curitiba for their inspiration.
It's technology transfer in reverse. It's learning from a very simple system built in Brazil. And if we can learn from people who didn't have the money to solve the very same problem, well, why not learn from them?
Are we learning from Curitiba? Are we learning from cities in the developing world that have tried simple solutions to complicated problems? Can we apply them in cities 5, 10 times the size of Curitiba? Joining me to discuss this question, Martha Wellborn, the director of the Surface Transit Project in Los Angeles, and William Mitchell, dean at MIT of the School of Architecture and Planning. What has happened in Los Angeles? Could Los Angeles learn from the experiment in Curitiba?
There's no question about it. I think we're already learning about what has gone on in Curitiba. In fact, a group of us went down there to see what had happened and are convinced that that with some modifications, there will be some modifications, but that we could build a busway system, if you want to call it that, that could be very similar to Curitiba and could solve a lot of the transit problems that we have in Los Angeles.
The essence of what happened in Curitiba came from some very simple ideas. How did you see what Jaime Lerner did in Curitiba? What could you take from his experience and apply to Los Angeles?
Well, the most important thing that he did was to figure out how, since they couldn't afford a subway system, but they needed a transportation system, a transit system, he basically looked at what slows down a bus and got rid of everything that slows the bus down to allow it to go fast. So in a way, you can think of the bus is just the vehicle, but the bus system that he built is really very much, in fact, almost identical to light rail, the way we build light rail in the U.S. at least. So the bus is running in its own lane, usually two of them in opposite directions. The bus pulls up to a platform, since the floor of the bus is higher than the curb height. These are older buses they're using. These days we can buy low floor buses, but the platform is the same height as the floor of the bus. People they prepay to get onto the platform. So all of that slows down the bus is taken care of. And because they prepaid, they can have a lot of doors in the side of the bus. You don't just have to have one door. So all of these doors will open up to 5 doors in the double articulated buses. People go on and off in about 10 seconds, literally. And these are hundreds of people going on and off. And then the bus zooms down to its next stops, closes up its doors, zooms down to its next stop with synchronized traffic signals, allowing it to move basically at 1 mile increments from station to station. All of that is virtually the same as light rail, but with no rail, no poles, no wires, and no catenary. I mean, it's much less expensive. But by devising these 80-foot long, basically double-length buses, they are still able to put a lot of people on one vehicle, with the most expensive piece of the whole thing being the driver. So the one driver can carry a whole lot of people, approaching the numbers carried by one driver of a light rail vehicle. So we thought this made just exquisite sense, and we should try it in Los Angeles.
What we see today in Curitiba evolved over 25 years in a city that's tripled in size. Now, Los Angeles, with a 10 million, 12 million...
The regional area is 10 million, maybe up to 14 million, depends on what you count. But it's still growing. Los Angeles is still growing. Even the plan, the city's framework plan, the adopted plan of the city of Los Angeles, just for the city alone, not just the region, assumes the growth of 800,000 additional residents by the year 2010. So that's a staggering number.
If you linked the transportation system with the planning restrictions on high-rise, on density, as they've done in Curitiba, how long would that kind of policy link take to see a real change on the ground?
Well, I think the first question is, should you make that kind of policy link? I think the question to me is, and what they've solved in Curitiba by tying land use planning to transit planning, and by locating all high-rise development on the 5 spokes of the wheel where their busways are located, they've solved the problem of accessibility, getting the passenger or rider of the transit system very quickly to the transit system. But I think in Los Angeles, we're beginning to learn that that's the way we have to think about it. We can't immediately assume that we can change all the zoning, build all new high-rise buildings along new busways. We're beginning to realize the key is to get the passenger to the transit system. And I think there are many, many ways of doing that. One, frankly, is cars. There are, in Curitiba, they don't have park and ride lots. But in Los Angeles, that actually will make a lot of sense in some communities. For instance, in the San Fernando Valley, that may make a lot of sense when they're either park and ride or what they call kiss and ride, sort of drop-off locations, so that someone could then get on the transit system. But also, we're connecting center to center. So I think there can be sort of land use, high-density hubs, so that in Los Angeles, when we have a transit way, a busway, linking major centers, you don't have to have high-rise all along the path. You can have it at either end and still feed a continuous flow of origins and destinations, people moving back and forth, and basically keep enough of a ridership up that the system is affordable, that can be paid for.
The existing subway system, the $7 billion investment that over the next few years will extend out to North Hollywood, how long will those lines be? How many stations will there be? And will that system affect the location of high-rises?
That system is largely built around the historic core, around the downtown, the major center, I guess, of all of those that exist in Los Angeles. And a lot of the length of the system is actually zoned for higher-rise, mid to high-rise buildings already. Because a good portion of the subway right now is downtown or runs out to what's called the Mid-Wilshire district. Another section of it runs up Vermont Avenue, which is a largely retail, a very densely populated retail area, and then runs along Hollywood Boulevard, which is also highly developed. The subway would then end in the San Fernando Valley in a lower-rise district. But the fact of the matter is the rail system, while it is not, well, the subway system, I should say, because there's more rail than just the subway, but the subway system, while it is not extensive in the number of miles that it covers, currently, if I assume what is built now and what is under construction right now, it in fact does go close to a lot of the transit-dependent communities, which I think personally are those that we should serve with transit first and foremost. I think it's a good beginning. It's certainly not the end. The basic issue in Los Angeles is that there is not high density. We are not New York. We are not Chicago. We are not even San Francisco. We never will be. It will always be a lower-rise city, and when you have a lower-rise condition, it's very hard to pay for an expensive transit system. So we need a solution that is more affordable, that we can extend out over the full reach of the region, not just serving the downtown core. But I think that's a very good beginning, and I think the grade-separated condition that is inherent to a subway, that's the right place for that. And I think we can pick up from there and link up busways, and even the existing light rail can link up from there and reach out to other portions of the city.
How do you see the changes in Los Angeles and in Curitiba being examples for the rest of the world? Are other cities caught in exactly the same dilemma Los Angeles is?
Oh, many, many cities have these kinds of problems. I think part of the answer here is putting technologies together, thinking about the integration of technologies to solve a problem rather than just thinking of one system. So if you take transit, for example, we're just talking about, one of the great appeals of the automobile is it's there when you want it and you can take it where you want it to go, and that is a huge appeal. Right? Now, so one of the challenges then is to make a transit system as responsive or even more responsive than the automobile. And you can do that by making it smarter. If you embed intelligence in the system, so you manage it like a packet switching network, if you like, so you direct the streams of transit capacity to exactly where it's needed, when it's needed, then I think we can start to really have some major impacts of the kind that Martha is looking for. And we have to have major impacts. I mean, little incremental impacts are not enough. We have to have major impacts. So I think really rethinking the relationship of transit to information is one of the keys here.
Has the arrival of global positioning satellite, sub-meter accurate locational data, changed the way people think about how cities can be used efficiently?
Well, not yet, but I think it's beginning to, because as soon as you recognize that all of the moving parts of a city, the automobiles, the people, the trucks, the elements of the transit system, all of these can now be position aware. They can know where they are, and they can tell other elements in the system where they are, and you can compute on that information. So you can begin to think about coordination and control systems at a level of complexity and sophistication that was just impossible in the past.
Could it make the street grid of Los Angeles more effectively used? And enormous investments in place now. The numbers I hear, 40% of the surface area of Los Angeles covered by asphalt, which has implications for water runoff and for vegetation. Maintaining that so that the cars don't fall into potholes every time they make a left turn. That enormous investment could be turned to a more efficient distribution of existing traffic. Is Los Angeles making the investments to do that?
Well, I think so. If you just think about the busway system, one piece of it that is very important and will be necessary as we modify that system for Los Angeles is the synchronization of traffic signals to allow the bus, basically, which is trying to operate as a subway, but it's right in the street, to allow it to move from one stop down to its next stop, which is probably a mile away, because this is sort of the, the trunk line of the system. This is not the regular bus. I think that, there are probably more intelligent ways of making the signal even smarter. It sees the bus, or it sees two buses coming, or it doesn't see a bus, and so it allows a whole lot of cross traffic to go through. Because one of the big issues in translating the Curitiba model to Los Angeles is that we have far more cars on the street in the U.S. in general, and certainly in Los Angeles, than they do in Curitiba, even though that city has the second highest automobile ownership in Brazil. So it's quite high for Brazil, but it still doesn't hit the numbers that we achieve. So when you try to synchronize the traffic signals and allow the bus to move quickly, suddenly you're backing up cars on the side streets, and it all begins to fall apart. And then suddenly, if you're grade separating the bus from the cars, suddenly at some point you become a subway all over again. So.
For transcripts, multimedia files, and worldwide links, click www.djourney.com. Los Angeles once had a public transit network that worked. The red car system moved people over 1,200 miles of non-polluting streetcar tracks from home to work to school and to the beach. It was efficient and low cost.
A lot of people, a lot of older people that I talk to about this idea say, oh, it used to be so wonderful we could catch these red cars and go anywhere in the city.
But 50 years ago, LA ripped up the red car system as mass transit ridership declined in light of the individual freedoms promised by the automobile. Freedoms which today are proving to be increasingly costly and inequitable.
And this is perhaps the biggest challenge facing Los Angeles, because we are the car capital of the world. It is part of our psyche, it is part of our personality, and to a large extent, it's very difficult to get anywhere without a car.
LA's challenge now is to design a transport network that makes the streets and freeways and the cars that use them more responsive to traffic patterns.
Why not handle the roadways like we handle the computer networks, so that when there's a problem, you can reroute around the problem and the majority of the people never know there's an issue.
Planners at the state of Maryland have designed an information network to prevent traffic jams before they happen.
So we created things called advanced traffic management systems that would try to put detectors out on the roads that would detect where the problems were. They would put cameras on the road so that we could see where there were issues, so that when there was an accident, we can, number one, coordinate our response. But we could also reroute people around the problem so they would never notice there was a problem there to begin with.
The next step is to mitigate the traffic jams created by the design of the road system itself.
One of the first technologies used was a technology that's been around for years, which is a loop detector. If you ever pull up in the intersection in the middle of the night and the light just turned red and it turns green to let you go, it's because there was a loop detector buried under the pavement, and when your car stopped on top of it, it checked the other lanes and said, well, I'll let you go, and it lets you go through.
Los Angeles has taken the loop detector one step further. Sensors embedded at intersections send real-time information on traffic flow to LA's automated traffic surveillance and control center. Traffic signals are regulated based on conditions as they happen. LA drivers now spend up to 40% less time sitting at red lights.
In the future, it's hoped that that system can be integrated to help in public transit by giving priority to buses and shuttles, making the service more attractive compared to driving.
Eventually, the network will anticipate when streets are likely to become overloaded and make decisions to adjust traffic flow. These neural networks, with an adaptive capacity found in nature, will help manage the world's most congested cities according to biological and ecological principles. Get connected. www.djourney.com.
One of the very efficient ways of decreasing the traffic load in the city is to decrease the traffic. If there's no need to go someplace, then you can remove that traffic from the street. If information systems allow people in their homes to purchase things across a network without going to a store, or to have physical shipment of things they need made by vans that are collecting and distributing without the need for the private vehicle, could we alter traffic patterns in our densely traveled cities?
Well, I think the answer is probably yes, but it's much more complex than it initially seems, right? As you were just pointing out, you may order something over the internet, but still then somebody has to come and deliver it. So you're generating a different kind of trip, but you're still generating a trip. I think the ultimate effect is not going to be simple substitution of telecommunications for transportation, the old idea of what telecommuting might be, but the kinds of basic structural reorganizations of cities that start to become possible as a result of this. So, for example, if you can take advantage of good telecommunications to move part of the workplace into the home and create a different kind of neighborhood, then you begin to change commuting patterns fundamentally. You're not generating the same kind of commute back and forth in peak hour. Maybe it's a different kind of time pattern. Maybe you probably still have to go into the office every now and again. There are reasons why you still need to be face-to-face and so on. But still, if you can start getting these fundamental changes in land use patterns and in the ways that neighborhoods are organized, then I think we're going to see some really significant results.
Can there be a decentralization of decision-making about these trips, about the methods by which groceries or things that each household needs are allocated? Can regional centers rather than central centers or neighborhood centers decide upon distribution of goods?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a very fundamental change in the logistics of distribution of goods. I mean, we look at what's happened to bookselling, for example, right? Amazon has one gigantic warehouse in Seattle, right? And then a whole different kind of distribution system for getting the books from there into your living room. So different transportation system. We're starting to see the development on quite a large scale, quite successfully, of online grocery shopping, right? So again, you're not getting the trips to the supermarket in the family automobile, but you're getting a delivery van coming to your door. So there's a very close interrelationship between these new patterns of retailing, transportation systems and information systems. You have to think of them all together.
We've seen cities experiment with vehicle-free days.
Yeah.
In some cities, Milan, Santiago, a license plate number, odd or even, determines whether you drive on a given day because of the pollution. In Paris, a day-long ban on traffic changed the experience of Paris. It became a pedestrian city once again. Is this a direction cities are taking? Is there a feeling of too much is too much? We're strangling ourselves, we're destroying our beautiful cities by the presence of the automobile?
Oh, I think that's a universal feeling, yeah.
I agree, yeah. I think that's true. That's partly what started the transit system in Curitiba. Some very crowded streets in the center of the city, and someone had the notion of widening those streets, therefore destroying some of the historic fabric, some of the wonderful older buildings of the city, and the mayor stopped it, and basically those streets are now pedestrian streets. And the growth was moved out to the outer portions of the city, and the streets are preserved, the buildings are preserved, the environment is wonderful, the businesses are very happy, there are plenty of pedestrians to buy things, and
So in the same way the mayor designed the transit system with one criterion, minimize transit time for a person, make all of the systems function to achieve that goal.
Right.
Create the richness or maintain the richness of a city by banning those cars, the vehicles that destroy that fabric.
Right. I think one important lesson to remember from Curitiba is the focus on the individual, the focus on the citizens. If you're the mayor, speaking of those you're trying to take care of, I think the simple fact of thinking of that leads you to solutions you might not come up with otherwise. If you think of too much of a system or a centralized or a top-down approach, I think you can sometimes bog down and forget about the individual experience. But in thinking about what the passenger, the rider of the transit system was going through, and how long would be possible for them to either stand or sit on a bus, and therefore the desire for more buses, and therefore the notion that they actually pay the private companies that run the system by the number of miles they run, not by the passengers they carry, encourages them to get more buses out there on the street, and therefore helps the passenger. Because there are more buses, it's easier to get someplace, you don't wait as long.
So there's a simple measure.
It's a simple, very simple measure, and it's totally non-technological, but but very important, a very human measure.
You can't just ban something. It works as a demonstration. You can ban traffic in the centre of the city for a day, and everybody sees how wonderful it is not to have traffic in the centre of the day. Ban it for a week, they get a little less happy about it. Ban it for a year, and they get very unhappy. So the trick, of course, and this is obvious, but I think it's worth saying, the trick is to invent the viable alternative that achieves the advantages and deals with the issues. For example, the cars were there to begin with. People love automobiles for very good reasons. So if you want to get rid of automobiles, you have to invent a viable alternative, which is what Jamie Lerner did in Curitiba.
Now, in teaching the next generation of planners about how to rethink what they've done, if you use the examples of Los Angeles or a California city in general, the planning paradigm for that city was a vehicle that allowed you to carry both the occupants to and from work and bring the food and so forth to parking. Rethinking the layout not only of the home, but of the block on which the home is situated and of the location of the warehouses that contain the food and the goods the homes need, may require a redesign in totality, a systemic redesign.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a fundamental change happening in the way we think about cities. We've always understood that infrastructures shape cities. So canal systems, road systems, rail systems, electric power grids, of course, sewer and water supply, all of these sorts of things we understand very well, that they shape cities. We understand a little bit about how they fit together. We understand, as talking about in Curitiba, the relationship between land use and transportation. I think it needs to be a three-way thing now. You need to look at land use, transportation, and telecommunication as a kind of triangle and think of how all of those pieces work together. Essentially, the strategy since the Industrial Revolution has been to make cities work harder in order to accommodate the increasing demands on them. So more transit, more water supply, more automobiles, more construction. You know, just make them bigger and higher capacity and make them work harder in order to accommodate the demands. We have to switch to a strategy, I think, of working smarter rather than working harder. So you introduce the information technology in the right way so you can coordinate the operations of systems so that you can deliver just exactly what's needed in a particular context, no more, no less.
I'd like to thank you, Bill Mitchell, Arthur Wellborn, for your insights into cities, technology, and the future. For further information, for books, websites, things you can use to explore these questions, look at the Digital Journey website. Thank you for joining us. For Digital Journey, I'm John Gage.
Digital communication is creating new ways of generating and saving energy. On the next Digital Journey, host John Gage explores architecture and the information age.
From the way companies process information to the way they share information. From the way they create ideas to the way they sell ideas. Secure old customers. Attract new customers. Use devices to extend their business. Leap ahead of someone else's business. At Sun, our technologies power the net for business. We're the dot in .com. What can we .com for you?